You have no place in this house." Emily's voice cuts through me sharper than any scalpel I ever held in the hospital. Her eyes are cold, like glass that has forgotten how to catch the light. She stands in the doorway, arms folded, blocking me as if I were an intruder. I freeze. My fingers, stiff with age, slip off the brass doorknob. The small suitcase in my hand trembles, wheels rattling against the wooden floor like a faint, dying heartbeat. For a moment, I don't even breathe. This house. I can still smell the fresh paint from years ago, when I worked double shifts as a nurse just to pay for it. Every brick, every tile, was a piece of my body I gave away. And now my daughter, my own blood, looks at me as if I am a stranger trespassing on foreign soil. My heart pounds against my ribs, so loud I can hear it echo in my ears. The silence around us feels heavier than iron. Somewhere down the hall, a clock ticks, steady and cruel, counting the seconds of my humiliation. I try to speak. My lips part, but only a thin whisper escapes. "Emily. This is my home too." Her mouth curls into something between a smirk and a snarl. "No, Mother. It's mine now. You signed it over, remember? You don't belong here anymore." Her words land like nails hammered into my chest. I grip the handle of my suitcase tighter, until my knuckles burn white. The smell of her perfume, sharp, synthetic, fills the narrow space between us, suffocating me. I remember when that scent was baby powder and warm milk, when her tiny hand clung to my finger as though I was her entire world. Now she won't even let me cross the threshold. I step back, my heel catching on the edge of the welcome mat. The same mat I bought 15 years ago, embroidered with the word family. How bitterly it mocks me now. "Emily," I try again, my voice breaking. "I worked my whole life for this roof, these walls. Every night I dragged myself home from 12-hour shifts just to keep you safe here." Her gaze doesn't flicker. If anything, her eyes grow colder. "And now it's time you let go. You have no place in this house." The hallway spins. My vision blurs. I blink, hard, but the tears force their way through anyway, hot against my wrinkled cheeks. The suitcase slips, crashing to the floor with a hollow thud. The sound rings through the house like a verdict. Guilty, unwanted, discarded. In the corner of my eye, I see the framed photograph still hanging on the wall me. In my nurse's uniform, Emily in her graduation gown. I remember the pride swelling in my chest that day. I had thought, all the sacrifices were worth it. Now that same picture feels like evidence of a cruel lie. The air feels icy, though I know the heater hums softly somewhere in the background. My hands tremble, my knees ache. I feel ancient, older than my 74 years, as though the weight of betrayal has stolen whatever youth was left inside me. I swallow hard. My throat burns. "So this is it?" I ask. "After everything, you cast me out of my own home?" She doesn't answer. She doesn't have to. The silence screams louder than words. For a moment, the world goes still. My breathing slows. Even the clock seems to pause, as if the house itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if I will fight or collapse. But all I can do is stand there, gripping the handle of the suitcase like a lifeline, staring at the daughter I no longer recognize. And then it hits me, like a storm breaking open inside my chest. This house, this place, this daughter, none of it is mine anymore. The truth stings sharper than her words. The house I built brick by brick has turned me into an exile. The child I raised with blood and bone has declared me a stranger. I close my eyes. For the first time in my life, daylight feels darker than midnight. The old key rests heavy in my pocket. I've carried it for years, even after Emily took the locks away from me. Its teeth are worn smooth, the brass dulled to a muted gold. When I run my thumb along the ridges, it feels almost warm, as if it still remembers the countless times it turned in my hand, opening the door to what I once thought was safety. That key opens a floodgate. Suddenly, I am no longer 74, standing outside a house that no longer wants me. I am 32 again, exhausted from a night shift. My nurse's shoes squeaking against the hospital's linoleum floors. My body aching, but my mind racing toward a single thought. This house, this dream. It was 1983 when I signed the papers. The house cost 1118,000, a mountain to climb for a single mother. My down payment drained every savings account I had. I remember the pen shaking in my hand as I signed, knowing I was binding myself to 20 years of mortgage payments. Every month, the check was $615.42. I wrote that number so many times, it carved itself into my memory. Sometimes, when the bills piled higher than my patience, I'd close my eyes and see the digits glowing behind my eyelids. I patched leaky pipes myself. In winter, I laid towels against the drafty windows because new panes were too expensive. The roof. God, the roof cost me $4,200 in 1991, money I didn't have, scraped together with overtime hours that nearly broke my back. But I did it. Brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, I turned that house into a fortress for Emily and me. Emily's asthma attacks were the worst. The hospital bills stacked like tombstones on the kitchen counter. 342 due for steroids, 76 for the inhaler, 1200 for one AR visit. I would hold her hand in those white rooms, whispering, "You'll be okay, baby. Mommy's here." And when she slept, pale and fragile under the fluorescent lights, I counted my overtime hours like rosary beads, calculating how many more nights I'd need to cover the costs. Her education came next. Tuition at State College, at Thales 95T per year. Books another, $700. I remember standing at the bursar's office, writing a check with trembling hands, while Emily scrolled her phone beside me. She didn't look up when I handed the paper over. "Thank you, Mom," she muttered, eyes still on the screen. It was casual, careless, but I clung to those two words as if they were gospel. I can still see my kitchen table, the stack of envelopes waiting each month. Electricity $89, 73 in December's, water 56, 12 in July, gas bills soaring past $200 in February. I kept them in a plastic folder labeled LBAIH in bold letters. It gave me pride. Proof that, though I was alone, I was capable. My nurse's uniform carried the scent of bleach so strong, it clung even after washes. Once, Emily wrinkled her nose when I came home. "Mom, you smell like the hospital," she said, pushing past me. Her words stung, though I laughed it off. See foreshadowing, though I didn't know it then. The distance already creeping in. Emily was 18 the night she promised me. We were sitting on the old brown sofa I'd rescued from a yard sale. She had just gotten her acceptance letter for college. Tears blurred my vision as I read it out loud. "Mom," she said softly, leaning against me, "don't worry about the future. One day, I'll take care of you. I promise." That moment burned itself into my soul. I believed her. With everything in me, I believed her. So I worked harder, sacrificed deeper. I told myself, this is the deal. You give everything now, and she will give love later. But even then, small cracks showed. Once, when she brought friends over, I overheard her say, "Sorry about the furniture, it's old. My mom's obsessed with saving money." I laughed from the kitchen, pretending it didn't cut me open. Pretending it was just teenage carelessness. Another time, she rolled her eyes when I handed her cash for rent in her college apartment. "You know, most parents just wire it. Do you really have to count every bill?" I counted them anyway. 20 crisp 20s, stacked neatly, because every dollar meant another night I'd traded sleep for her security. Looking back, I see how naive I was. I thought sacrifice was a language children always understood. I thought love, poured out endlessly, would circle back like rain returning to the sea. But the truth? Love, unguarded, can evaporate. I was blind. Blind to the sharp edges in her voice. Blind to the way her eyes slid past me when she had what she needed. Maybe I wanted to be blind. Because the alternative. The possibility that my daughter could grow cold, that one day she might tell me I didn't belong, was too unbearable to face. It was a Tuesday morning, ordinary in every way, except for the war raging inside me. The coffee sat untouched on the counter, going cold. I stared at the stack of envelopes spread before me. Bank statements, utility bills, the automatic transfer slip that had been my silent habit for years. My hand hovered over the pen. My fingers trembled, the skin thin and veined from decades of work. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the kitchen clock. Everyday noises. But to me, they sounded like drums announcing a verdict. For 20 years, I had signed without hesitation. Every month, the same ritual, money flowing out of my account and into theirs, as if love could be proven in dollars. But that morning, the paper blurred before my eyes. I lowered the pen. My hand shook so badly the ink smeared into a crooked line. My chest tightened, not from weakness, but from a sudden, violent clarity. If I keep doing this, what will be left of me? If I drain the last of my savings, will they ever see me as more than a wallet with a heartbeat? Sick it. If I keep paying, do I also pay with my dignity? And if I stop? Will I finally remember who I am? The questions came like hammer blows, one after another. Short, merciless. They struck deeper than any insult Emily had ever thrown at me. For years, I told myself that silence was strength. That sacrifice would buy me love. But now, in the quiet of my kitchen, I realized silence had only made me invisible. I pressed the pen down one last time, not to sign, but to strike. A single slash, firm and final, cutting through the transfer slip. The sound was barely a whisper, just the faint rip of paper fibers surrendering. But to me, it was thunder. A clean break. I exhaled, and for the first time in years, my lungs filled all the way. Then, I reached for the old brass key on the table. The one Emily had once taken from me when she changed the locks. I held it tight, the ridges biting into my skin. That afternoon, I called a locksmith. Together we replaced every lock in my small apartment. As the new bolts clicked into place, the metallic clang rang in my chest like a declaration. This space is mine, and mine alone. Of course, fear gnawed at me. What if I was wrong? What if Emily came back, softer, repentant, and I had burned the last bridge? But another image rose, darker and truer. Me, 10 years from now, frail and penniless, still handing over money I didn't have, still begging for scraps of affection. That was the real cost. That was the death I feared more than any grave, the slow erasure of my self-respect. I had already lost their love. I would not also lose myself. My knees still shook as I closed the last envelope, but inside, something steadied. The sentences in my mind shortened, sharpened. No more rambling excuses, no more tender lies. Just truth. Clean and hard. I wasn't their victim anymore. I wasn't their bank. I wasn't their shadow. I was Margaret Wilson. I walked to the window, pulled the curtains open, and let the morning light spill across the room. It wasn't warm. It was pale, cold, the kind of light that shows every wrinkle, every scar. But it felt honest. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for permission. I wasn't waiting for gratitude. I was holding the key. The knock came sharp against my new door. 3 raps that carried more arrogance than sound. Through the peephole, I saw them. Emily, her husband Daniel, and a man in a tailored suit with a leather briefcase. My stomach tightened. Even before I opened the door, I knew this wasn't a visit. It was an ambush. I turned the key, slowly, deliberately. The bolt scraped against the metal with a defiance of its own. When the door opened, Emily's perfume hit me first, sickly sweet, masking the bitterness underneath. "Mother," she said, smiling without warmth, "we need to talk." We sat in the living room, the same space where once Emily had sprawled on the rug with coloring books. Now the air felt stale, toxic. The new locks glinted on the door behind me, a reminder that this was my space, my last space. On the coffee table, Daniel dropped a thick folder. The papers inside slid slightly, their edges sharp as knives. The lawyer cleared his throat, tapping a pen against the table in a steady rhythm. Each tap echoed in my skull like a countdown. I set 2 cups of tea before them. My hands shook just enough that the porcelain clinked. Not fear, adrenaline. Emily leaned forward, voice soft. "Mom, we just want what's best for you." I met her eyes. "What's best for me, or what's best for you?" She tilted her head, feigning pity. "You don't need so much money at your age. Why let it sit there when it could support the family?" Daniel chimed in, his tone oily. "Think of it as securing your legacy. This way, everyone wins." I straightened my back. I already secured my legacy. I raised a daughter. I worked 40 years without asking for anything in return. That was the legacy. The lawyer slid a sheet from the folder and pushed it toward me. "Mrs. Wilson, this is a simple authorization. It grants your daughter authority to manage your finances, purely administrative. You'll still have oversight." His words were smooth, but the paper on the table looked like a guillotine blade. Emily's smile dropped. Her voice sharpened. "Mother, sign it. Don't be difficult. You're 74. How long do you think you'll even need this money?" The words cut deeper than I expected. My hand clenched in my lap, until my nails dug crescents into my skin. I forced my voice steady. Every dollar in that account was pulled out of my bones. Night shifts, double shifts, holidays alone. I didn't work myself raw to become a shadow in my own life. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Be reasonable. You're just making things harder. If you don't cooperate, we'll have to take this through legal channels." The lawyer nodded slightly, as if rehearsed. "It would be unfortunate if this became adversarial." My breath caught. For a moment, the room blurred. I saw hospital bills, tuition checks, grocery receipts, all the invisible threads that had tied me to Emily's life. And now, she was severing them with a single stroke of entitlement. I pushed the papers back across the table. The folder hit Daniel's elbow with a soft thud. "No." Emily's voice rose. "Mom, stop being stubborn. Just sign it." I stood. My knees trembled, but my spine locked straight. The teacup rattled on its saucer as I set it down, but my voice was steel. "I am not the silence you buy with a bill. I am not the shadow you move around when it suits you." I drew in a breath, steady and loud enough for every word to land. "I am not a thing in this house." The room froze. Even the lawyer stopped tapping his pen. Emily's face flushed red, her mouth opening and closing like she'd swallowed fire. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Maybe," I said, "but I'd regret more if I handed over the last piece of myself." They gathered their papers in a flurry, Daniel muttering curses under his breath. The lawyer stood, smoothing his suit, already detached. Emily was last to move. She paused at the doorway, eyes burning holes through me. For a moment, I searched her face for the daughter I once knew, the girl who promised to take care of me. But all I saw was hunger. Then the door slammed. Silence collapsed over the room like dust. My hands still trembled, my heart raced. I sank into the armchair, clutching the edge until my knuckles whitened. But inside, under the shaking, a spark had lit. For the first time in years, I wasn't crushed beneath their demands. I wasn't quiet. I wasn't bought. The papers still lay on the table, untouched. My untouched tea had gone cold. But I looked at the new locks gleaming in the hallway light, and I knew Something had changed. I wasn't theirs to claim anymore. The envelope was thick, the kind that never carries good news. It arrived on a Wednesday, 9:17 a.m., the mailman's footsteps fading before I even reached the door. I recognized the return address immediately. Clark and Fellows, LLP. And my fingers went cold. The paper rasped as I tore it open. A chemical smell rose from the ink. Summons and complaint. Application for temporary conservatorship. G.A. Guess. Oraguess exhibits A.D. My name in bold. My life in neat paragraphs. Allegations arranged like furniture by someone who had never lived in this house. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the tick of the wall clock, the scratch of my breath against the quiet, as if the apartment itself were listening. By the time I reached Exhibit CCS, my hands were shaking so badly the page blurred. It was a EDD-derable power of attorney, dated 4 months earlier, appointing Emily Wilson as my agent. My signature dragged across the bottom in a tired loop, a pale ghost of my handwriting. I traced it once with my fingertip. It was not mine. The room tilted. The key in my pocket pressed into my thigh, blunt and hot. I set the papers down and pressed my palms against the table, willing the world to steady. Outside, a neighbor laughed. Somewhere upstairs, water rushed through pipes. Life continued, indifferent. The knock at my door came soft, an old rhythm. Robert Windstopper. When I opened it, he didn't have to ask. He looked at my face, then at the papers in my hands, and his own hands, scarred from years of fixing boat motors, curled into fists. I made tea, I said, because that's what you say when your life is being rewritten by strangers. He sat, glasses low on his nose, reading line by line, lips moving. When he got to my signature, he inhaled sharply. That's not your hand, Margaret. I know. My voice came out smaller than I expected. He turned the page, jaw tight. Paragraphs rolled on. Incapacity. Confusion. 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 Mismanagement. The language was clean as a blade, indifferent to blood. A line said I'd wandered off from my own apartment and been found disoriented at the grocery store. I remembered the day, December 3rd, 4:58 p.m. I'd stayed late choosing a decent cut of meat because chuck roast had crept over 6:49 lb, and I wanted stew that would last 3 days. I wasn't disoriented. I was checking the shelf for a cheaper brand. Robert reached across the table and took my hands. His palms were warm and certain. Sister Margaret, you have saved so many people in the hospital. Now let someone save you. He hadn't used Vietnamese before with me. I don't know where he learned the sentence. Maybe from the neighbor down the hall who likes to teach people one kind thing to say. It startled me anyway. Its tenderness, its clarity. He squeezed my fingers. Let me help you. Something inside me unclenched. How? We start with a lawyer. Not theirs. Yours. Bad news travels like smoke. Thin, quick, stinging. By afternoon, the women at the bakery on the corner had gone quiet as I walked in. The cashier, who usually called me Han, rang up my bread without looking at me. Outside, 2 men by the newspaper stand dropped their voices when I passed. I carried the loaf home like evidence. In the stairwell, I caught fragments. Sad, isn't it? Older people don't know what they're doing with money. Good. The daughters stepping in. I wanted to tell them about the EC overtime slips. The 615-42 mortgage. HS me. The roof repair I paid in sweaty bills in a summer that smelled like tar and heat stroke. Instead, I climbed the stairs, each step a weight, the loaf of bread growing heavy as a brick. I wasn't just losing my family now. I was being reframed in public. My choices reinterpreted by people who had never seen the inside of my freezer or my bank ledger, who thought frugality was a symptom and silence was a diagnosis. The next morning, Robert drove me to meet Anna Parker, a lawyer with sleeves rolled up and hair tied back like she meant business and had brought her own storm. Her office smelled faintly of lemon and toner. She shook my hand, looked me straight in the eye, and did not smile. "Mrs. Wilson, I've read the complaint." She tapped the folder. "If these signatures are forged, we'll prove it. We'll need samples of your real handwriting from different years. Checks. Medical forms. Anything." "I kept everything," I said, embarrassed by the truth of it. "Good," she said, as if my compulsion were a virtue. "We'll also want phone records. They allege you called Emily on a November 14 at 2:03 a.m. Dal Protz, confused and panicked, begging for help with an online bill. Do you remember that?" "Yes," I said, anger flaring. My bank flagged a charge from a boutique I'd never heard of, Larkin LASIK, and froze my card. I called Emily to ask, because she'd used my card before for groceries. She told me not to worry, said she'd handle it. I paused. The air felt thick. The charge cleared the next day anyway. Anna wrote notes in a quick hand. "We'll subpoena the bank. We'll get the statement. We'll match timestamps." Robert shifted in his chair. "She has neighbors who can speak to her routine. I've got camera footage from our hallway. December 3rd, 5:21 p.m. She came back with groceries, steady as you like, unlocked her door without trouble." Anna nodded, eyes shining. "Perfect. Steve footage beats hearsay." She flipped to Exhibit D. "This letter from Dr. Holmes says you frequently forget appointments and misplace bills. Do you see him regularly?" "Once a year," I said. "For blood pressure. I've never missed an appointment. I write them on the calendar by the fridge. And I bring the bills to the post office in the 12th every month so I don't forget. My father taught me. Pay on the same day, every time." "Colander photos," Anna said, already moving. "We'll date stamp them. We'll get your postal receipts. We'll show a pattern." She leaned back, pen a metronome against the desk. "Mrs. Wilson, they're building a narrative. We'll build a cracker day." The call came that afternoon. My old friends Lydia, we used to split shifts so we could nap in the break room, sounded guilty. Emily asked me to write a letter," she confessed. "She said you were overwhelmed. She said you'd be safer with help." Lydia's voice wobbled. I wrote it. I'm sorry." My mouth tasted like tin. "Did you think I was unsafe?" "No," she said, too quickly. "I thought, she's your daughter. She must know. She said you'd be angry, but it was for the best." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, the quilt ruff under my palms. So that was how it worked. Borrow trust, spend it like cash, and leave me with the debt. My chest tightened. Not from panic, from fury so clean it almost felt like relief. Anna listened, jaw set. "We'll call Lydia," she said. "On cross, we'll ask if she's seen your checklist. We'll ask if she's ever once witnessed the behavior she described." Hearsay falls apart under weight. The phone buzzed again. My pharmacist. "Mrs. Wilson, I've got the refill logs you requested. Blood pressure meds. Lisinopril 10 mg well, filled CO on schedule for the last 2 years. No lapses. We can certify." I hung up slowly, the line warm against my ear. Proof was beginning to gather like small birds, nervous but perching all the same. The rumors grew teeth. I heard them snap in the stairwell, on the corners. She gave all her money to a scam. She can't remember her own address. She wanders at night. On Friday evening, I found a note taped to my door. "If you need help, call your daughter." No signature. I peeled it off gently, smoothed the tape, set it in the drawer with my utility receipts and my mortgage letters, not out of sentiment, out of habit. Proof of another kind. That night, Lydia came over with chicken soup and eyes that couldn't settle. We ate at the small table by the window. The soup steamed in the cold air. She apologized 3 times. I said, "Thank you for telling me." 4. On the 5th, we both laughed, and some air returned to the room. "Remember the SIV pump that got stuck during the snowstorm?" she asked, a smile tugging at the past. "You crawled under it with a splashlight in your teeth," I said. I held the tubing. We swore we'd never work nights again. And then we did. We grinned, weary and warmed. After she left, the apartment felt less like a bunker. I washed bowls slowly, listening to the hiss of the tap, the clink of china, the sounds of a life still in my hands. Tension. The next day, Anna forwarded a scan of another document the other side intended to file. AA bank withdrawal authorization. With my name in a shaky print, allowing Emily to move 12,500s for home maintenance. The date matched the week I'd noticed a large transfer disappearing and been told by the bank it was authorized. "They're going to claim you asked for it," Anna said. I pulled my Ledger K from the drawer. I write in it every Sunday. A habit as old as the house I once bought. December 10th, the entry read, "Bank flagged." Spoke to Emily. She said she'd fix it. It was underlined twice. I took a photograph with my phone, hands steady now. And it's see, each release. In the afternoon, Robert knocked again, holding up a key USB drive like a talisman. "Hallway camera," he said. 2 weeks of it. Shows you coming and going. Shows Emily visiting in November 14 at 1:58 a.m. to a station. Not to help, but leaving 5 minutes later with a 6-shoebox from your closet. Thought you should see. We watched the footage on my old TV. The image was grainy, but the timestamp was crisp, Emily's hair falling across her face as she carried the box, her head tilted, her stride certain. Robert didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I felt the anger again, cleaner now, honed. Not a fire to burn me. A blade to cut me free. Word spreads both ways if you let truth walk. Marisol, the young woman from a 3BB who waters the hallway plants, knocked shyly. "I heard things," she said, cheeks pink. "I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner." 24C. November 22, I saw your daughter yelling outside your door. You were calm. She threw her coffee on the floor. Marisol held out her phone. I recorded it. I don't know why. It just felt wrong. The video was short, unsteady, real. Anna's email reply was 5 words. "This is gold. Thank her." At church on Sunday, the pastor looked at me longer than usual, then nodded once, like a blessing for a battle I hadn't wanted but would fight anyway. After the service, Mrs. Nguyen, from the back pew, pressed a small envelope into my hand, a printout of texts from Emily asking her to help persuade Margaret to sign, promising something in return. I didn't ask what. "People think old means easy," Mrs. Nguyen said softly. "They forget we have long memories." Nights were still the hardest. The apartment went quiet in a way that invited every shadow in. I lay awake and watched the streetlight cut a pale square on the ceiling. My mind ran circles. What if the judge believes her? What if paper beats truth? What if I am strong, but not enough? I got up and made tea. The kettle hissed like a warning and a comfort. I opened the drawer and spread my Sevidence Sklake talismans. The Gledgers, years thick, my handwriting steady across seasons. Sis HSB. Bank statements, dates circled, calls logged. She-S Pharmacy, refills, on time, exact. The C, USB, with the hallway footage. NT5 Results video. The photo of my ex-calendar. The squares full of small certainty. Pace on the 12th. Jane Sheets, S on Fridays. JCES EC JCC Jace. Gall Lydia on the 1st. ESECCCSE. JCZCZTCCSES. I touched the old key last. Its teeth pressed crescents into my palm. I closed my hand until the metal warmed. My fear didn't vanish. It stood aside. The next morning brought another letter. A letter and notice of hearing for March 6, 9:00 a.m., Department 4. Department 4. I pinned it to the corkboard above the table, right next to the recipe for lemon bars Emily used to love when she still said please and thank you. Robert stopped by with bagels. "We're ready," he said. And for a moment, I believed him in a way that made my knees weak. He sat with me while I practiced answers Anna had written out. Short, clear, honest. We timed them. He nodded, eyes bright. When he left, he squeezed my shoulder. I watched him go down the hall, his back straight, and felt less alone than I had in months. Still, as evening fell, the old doubt crept back with the lengthening shadows. What if truth is not enough? Jax, what if the paper wins? Well, what if a forged line on a cold page can erase the warm history of a life? Mine one careful stroke at a time. I stood at the window, the city's winter light thinning into dusk. The summons pinned behind me like a flag on enemy ground. The key warmed against my skin. An anchor and a question both. When I walk into that courtroom, will they see me? Or only the story she has written? It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind that should have smelled of soup and old books. My grandson, Ethan, had left his backpack on the couch. He was only 12, too young to know the storm swirling among adults, too innocent to hide things well. When I picked it up to move it, a folder slid halfway out of the front pocket. The edge of the paper caught my eye. Official letterhead, the kind that prickles the skin even before you read a word. I hesitated. Then I pulled it free. At first, all I saw was my name. Margaret Wilson. Bold. Final. Then my breath snagged. It was a 6 power of attorney. And there, at the bottom, scrawled in blue ink, was my signature. Or something meant to be. I froze. The paper felt cold, slick against my fingers, though my palms had gone damp. The ink lines looped clumsily, like a stranger had worn my skin for a moment and tried to mimic my hand. My knees weakened, and I lowered myself onto the armchair. The clock on the wall ticked once, heavy as a gavel. My throat tightened. My eyes blurred. The letters swam, but the lie on the page burned clear. This isn't me. This is theft with a pen. This is erasure, dressed as legality. Why? I touched the signature again, tracing the false curves. My finger trembled, as if I were brushing a scar I didn't remember earning. My voice came before I knew I was speaking. A whisper, hoarse and cracked. "Emily, do you want to erase me with this line of ink?" The room didn't answer, but the silence seemed to nod. The tears that blurred my sight did not wash me away. They sharpened something instead. Beneath the ache, a heat rose, slow, steady, dangerous. My chest pounded, not with fear, but with fury. Fury that my daughter, my own flesh, would dare to write me out of my life with a pen. I held the paper tighter. For a moment, I imagined tearing it, shredding the lie into confetti. But no. Paper can be destroyed. Evidence must be kept. I folded it carefully. Precisely, my hand steady now. I slipped it into my drawer of receipts and records. It belonged there. Not as truth, but as proof. I stared at the drawer, at the brass knob worn by decades of use. My reflection wavered in its dull shine. If I stay quiet, how long before this paper becomes my reality? If they can forge my name once, how many more times will they try? 2. If ink can erase me, what else will they take? CADAG. Do I want my last years to vanish beneath a lie? The answers were not words. They were weight. They were resolve. I stood. My legs were stiff, but they carried me with purpose. I reached for the old key in my pocket, curling my fingers around its familiar ridges. For decades, it had opened the door to safety. Now it felt like a weapon, a reminder. I pulled out my phone. My hands no longer shook. The first number I dialed was Robert's. When he answered, his voice was calm as always, but I heard the steel underneath. "Robert," I said, my tone firmer than I had expected. "I found something. A forgery. They're trying to erase me on paper." He was silent for half a beat. Then it's time you stop fighting alone." The second number I searched was Anna Parker's, the lawyer Robert had mentioned before. My thumb hovered only for a second. Then I pressed call. When she answered, brisk and professional, I told her, "I need you. Not tomorrow. Now." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the forged document in front of me, the drawer open, my ledger and receipts lined up beside it like soldiers ready for battle. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the heater. I studied every false curve of that signature, memorizing it. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew I would one day stand in a room where this lie would be held against me. And I wanted to be ready. I laid my hand flat over the paper. My heart slowed. My breath deepened. They thought they could erase me with ink. They thought silence would bury me. They were wrong. Anna Parker's office smelled of lemon polish and toner. Sunlight angled across her desk, striking the neat stacks of files like stage lights on actors waiting for their cue. Anna herself was 40, sharp-eyed, her dark hair pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to hold her entire posture upright. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "we fight this with proof. Not outrage. Not memory proof." The word landed like a drumbeat. Proof. For years I had carried receipts, calendars, bank slips almost obsessively, afraid of forgetting. Now, at last, my hoarding of details became armor. At home, Robert helped me pull out boxes I had stored under the bed. We laid them on the kitchen table, one after another. ESBS Injir. I am Inshu. HT Prescas eyes from 1983, brittle and yellowed at the edges. Bonk statements, with dates circled in red, showing transfers that weren't mine. ECER, EICE, new Essenes, electricity, gas, water, lined up in plastic sleeves, proof that my routine was steady as breath. The SEUSB drive, with hallway camera footage Robert had saved. The table became a battlefield map, every scrap of paper a weapon sharpened by years of discipline. "Look at this," Robert murmured, pointing to a gas bill from February. "On the very day they claim you were confused, you logged the reading, paid the amount, filed the receipt. No one disoriented does that." Anna collected it all in thick binders, labeling each spine in tidy handwriting. She handled them with care, as if each binder was a sword she planned to draw in court. Proof wasn't enough. Anna knew it, and deep down, so did I. "You'll have to testify," she told me. Calm. Clear. "The court needs to hear not just what you've kept, but who you are." That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror. The harsh light made every wrinkle stand out, every line of age carved deep. My reflection stared back, weary but unbroken. I tried to say the words. "My name is Margaret Wilson. I am competent. I am in control of my life." At first, my voice cracked. The sentences came out thin, like a whisper sneaking through a locked door. I pressed my hands against the sink, shoulders sagging. Images flickered in my mind. The years I had stayed silent when Emily mocked my frugality, when Daniel dismissed my questions, when neighbors whispered behind my back. Every time, I had swallowed the words to keep peace. And every time, silence had shrunk me smaller. Not anymore. I tried again, louder. "My name is Margaret Wilson. I am competent. I am in control of my life." The sound filled the bathroom this time. My reflection didn't flinch. By the third repetition, my voice no longer wavered. It landed solid, like footsteps on stone. Robert came by the next evening, Lydia trailing behind him with a casserole. "Fuel for battle," she said, setting it on the counter. When I told them I had been practicing my testimony, Lydia smiled. "Do it now. In front of us." My stomach tightened, but I nodded. I stood in the center of my small living room, the binders stacked behind me like silent allies. I began haltingly, but as the sentences rolled, I saw Robert's eyes steady on mine, Lydia's hands folded like prayer. Their belief in me lifted my voice higher. When I finished, there was a pause. Then Robert stood and put a hand on my shoulder. "We're here. Whatever happens, you're not walking in there alone." Those words landed deeper than any law book. On the eve of the hearing, I spread everything across the table one last time. The papers lay in perfect rows, binders closed, USB drive gleaming faintly under the lamp. It looked less like clutter now and more like an arsenal. I ran my fingers over the spines, each one humming with the weight of memory. Not dead weight anymore. Ammunition. I thought of Emily then, the child who once promised to take care of me, the woman who now tried to erase me with forged ink. My chest tightened, but the ache no longer bent me. I whispered into the quiet, "Not this time." I lifted the old key from my pocket, feeling its familiar ridges. Once, it symbolized home. Tonight, it felt like a blade. The morning came gray and sharp, the sky the color of steel. I dressed slowly, buttoning my coat with steady fingers. The binders sat stacked by the door, ready to march with me. When I opened it, Robert and Lydia were waiting in the hall. Robert held a thermos of coffee. Lydia, a scarf. Neither said much. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. As we walked toward the elevator, Lydia reached out, squeezed my arm gently, and said, "We're here." The words echoed Anna's, echoed Robert's, echoed something I had forgotten how to tell myself. In the courthouse restroom, I stood before another mirror. My reflection was different now. Not younger, not smoother, but steadier. I whispered once, "My name is Margaret Wilson. I am competent. I am in control of my life." No crack. No shake. Just truth. I smiled at the woman in the mirror. Not because everything was won, but because something inside me had already shifted. The courtroom was colder than winter. Not in temperature, though the air was sharp, but in atmosphere. Light slanted through high windows, pale and unforgiving, casting stripes across rows of wooden benches. The walls loomed high, gray and bare. The judge sat elevated, black robe pooling like a shadow, gavel in hand. When the gavel struck, cock, cock, it cracked like thunder. The sound reverberated through the chamber, silencing even the coughs and whispers. I sat at the respondents' table, hands clasped, heart pounding. Anna Parker sat beside me, calm as still water, her binder open like a shield. Across from us, Emily dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, Daniel whispering at her side. Their lawyer, Mr. Clark, arranged his papers with precise clicks, as if every page were already a victory. The battle had begun. Mr. Clark rose first. His voice was smooth, practiced, carrying the weight of authority. "Your Honor, this case is not about greed. It is about top protection. My client, Emily Wilson, has watched her elderly mother decline, forgetting bills, mismanaging accounts, wandering the neighborhood. Out of love, she seeks to assume responsibility. She only asks for the power to keep her mother safe." He gestured toward Emily. She sniffled on cue, eyes shimmering. "I sacrificed for her," Emily said, voice breaking. "I checked on her night after night, but she won't admit she needs help. I can't just stand by and watch her fall apart." A murmur ran through the gallery. I felt eyes press on me, heavy, measuring. Mr. Clark slid a paper forward. "Here, Your Honor, is a signed power of attorney, dated November. Proof that Mrs. Wilson herself entrusted Emily with financial authority. We submit this as Exhibit A." The judge nodded, lips pursed. The paper passed from clerk to bench. My stomach clenched. That forged loop of ink again. My name, stolen. Anna stood, her movements precise. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm was a blade. Your Honor, she began, this case is not about protection. It is about 12's possession. My client, Margaret Wilson, is 74, yes, but she is lucid, disciplined, and independent. For 40 years, she managed every bill, every mortgage payment, every hospital charge. We will show evidence that she remains fully capable today. She lifted a binder, flipping it open. Exhibit 1, Mrs. Wilson's financial ledger. Every Sunday for decades, she recorded her expenses. Here, December 10, 2024, she noted an unauthorized bank withdrawal. We will show this matches a transfer Emily herself executed. She placed the book gently on the table, like a stone laid in a foundation. Exhibit 2, hallway camera footage, dated November 14, 1:58 a.m. It shows Emily leaving Mrs. Deteen Pye's, Wilson's apartment carrying a box of documents, hardly the act of a caregiver. Gasps rippled through the room. Anna's gaze sharpened. We will prove the alleged power of attorney is a forgery. We will prove Mrs. Wilson's competence. And we will prove that love does not look like theft. First came the pharmacist, a stout man in a white coat, spectacles sliding down his nose. I fill Mrs. Wilson's prescriptions every month, he testified. Blood pressure medication, lisinopril, 10 milligrams. She has never missed a refill. Always on time, always the correct dosage. Mr. Clark tried to chip away. But couldn't an elderly patient forget? The pharmacist smiled faintly. Perhaps. But not this one. She jokes with me every visit. She once reminded me I'd forgotten to initial a slip. If she's declining, I'd like some of her memory myself. Laughter flickered at the edges of the room. The judge's lips twitched. Robert took the stand, cap in hand, shoulders squared. I'm her neighbor. I see her daily. She pays bills, checks her mail, keeps her apartment spotless. My hallway camera shows her coming home steady, groceries in hand. The night they claim she was disoriented, she was carrying bags of potatoes and bread, walked straight as I've ever seen. Mr. Clark leaned forward. But Mr. Roberts, surely you can't observe her at all times. Robert cut him short, voice gruff. Enough to know she isn't what they say. Enough to know she doesn't need her own daughter stealing her signature. The gallery stirred. Someone clapped before being hushed. Finally, Lydia. She trembled as she spoke. I was misled, she confessed, eyes down. Emily told me Margaret was confused, that she needed help. I wrote a letter saying so. But it wasn't true. I regret it. The truth is, Margaret has always been clear, capable. She helped me balance my own bills just last month. The judge nodded slowly. The tide was shifting. But then came a voice I knew too well. My son, Michael. He took the stand on Emily's side. My chest tightened. I love my mother, he said, not meeting my eyes. But she's stubborn. She won't accept help. Emily's only trying to protect her. If giving Emily control means Mom is safe, then I think it's right. His words cut deeper than forged ink. My breath caught. My own son, siding with them. My hands shook under the table, nails biting into my palm. Anna touched my elbow gently. Breathe, she whispered. We'll answer. Anna rose again. Mr. Michael Wilson, you claim your mother forgets bills. Do you know the date of her last gas payment? Michael faltered. No. Anna turned to the bench. Your Honor, I submit Exhibit 7. Gas bill dated February 12. Paid on the 12th as always. Logged in her ledger. Receipt timestamped at 10:02 a.m. Mrs. Wilson has never missed this ritual. Her son may love her, But love is not the same as truth. The silence was thick. Michael shifted, ashamed. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, knees aching, but my back straight. "My name is Margaret Wilson," I began, voice steady. "I am 74 years old. I am not perfect. I forget where I put my glasses. I sometimes misplace my keys. But I do not forget who I am." I let my eyes sweep the room. Emily looked down. Michael stared at the floor. For decades, I worked double shifts as a nurse. I paid every mortgage check, every hospital bill, every tuition fee. I built a home out of exhaustion and love. I am not incompetent. I am not senile. I am tired, yes, but tired is not the same as incapable. My throat tightened, but I pressed on. I once believed family was an unbreakable rope, but today, I know better. Family can fray. Family can cut. And when it does, you must tie your own safety line. I placed my hand flat on the binder of evidence. This is my life, my work, my freedom, and I will not sign it away. The judge leaned forward. The air itself seemed to lean with him. The gavel struck. Skakike. This court finds the power of attorney fraudulent. The petition is denied. Full control of assets and property remains with Margaret Wilson. Mice, cock, K. Furthermore, evidence shows deliberate misrepresentation by the petitioners. The court strongly admonishes Emily Wilson for abuse of legal process. Sash, C, C. C. Itol, Cor, R. It was done. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, a cough smothered in the back row. Emily covered her face. Daniel cursed under his breath. Michael sank into his seat, pale. But I sat still. My shoulders felt lighter, as if a weight I had carried for decades had finally slid off. Tears burned my eyes, but they weren't bitter. They were sharp, clean, almost sweet. Through the high windows, a shaft of sunlight cut across the bench, landing warm on my hands. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not out of politeness, not for anyone else, but for me. When I pushed open the door that night, the silence startled me. The courthouse had been a storm, papers shuffling, voices clashing, the gavel cracking like thunder. Now, in my apartment, there was only stillness. I switched on the light. It hummed, casting a yellow glow across the room, and for the first time, I noticed how small the space felt. The binders lay stacked neatly on the table, the same ones that had saved me. I touched the spines as I passed, the cardboard cool beneath my fingertips. They felt heavier now, not with evidence, but with memory. Proof had won me freedom, but it had not mended what was broken. I set my coat on the chair. My body ached from hours of sitting upright, from holding my shoulders square under the judge's gaze. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, the ache went deeper than bone. That night, I could not sleep. I lay on my bed, the quilt tucked up to my chin, staring at the ceiling where the streetlight painted a pale square. The silence was thick. I listened for footsteps in the hall, for the sound of Emily's laughter from years ago, for Michael's voice calling, "Mom." None came. Instead, their courtroom faces replayed in my mind. Emily's tears that weren't tears at all. Daniel's clenched jaw. Michael's eyes refusing to meet mine. I heard their words again, sharper now in memory. "She doesn't know what she's doing. She needs protection. She's stubborn." I closed my eyes, but the words burned behind my lids. Yes, I had won. The judge's ruling was clear. My freedom, my assets, my dignity, all affirmed as mine. But in the dark, the question that mattered most pressed heavy against my chest. Each I won as a woman. But did I lose as a mother? I remembered Emily as a little girl, tugging on my uniform sleeve, asking for one more bedtime story even when I was half asleep from a night shift. I remembered Michael's laughter at 16, cracking jokes at the dinner table, promising he'd always take care of me. Those children lived only in memory now. In their place stood adults who saw me as an obstacle, a signature to seize, a wallet with a pulse. And yet, they were still mine. My blood, my bone. That truth sat like a stone I could not swallow. I whispered into the dark, my own voice startling me. Did I fail them somehow? Did love turn into debt without me noticing? Could I have stopped it years ago if I had spoken sooner, demanded respect sooner? The questions had no answers. They floated in the still air, unanswered, unanswerable. Near dawn, I gave up on sleep. I shuffled to the kitchen, barefoot on the cold linoleum. The kettle hissed as it boiled, steam rising like a ghost. I poured the water over a tea bag, watched the color bloom, dark and strong. I carried the cup to the window. The sky outside was pale, the first hint of morning stretching across the rooftops. I opened the window and let the chill air in. It bit at my skin, but it was honest. I sipped the tea slowly. The warmth slid down my throat, anchored me. It was a small thing, but it felt like a beginning. For once, I wasn't thinking of bills or battles or courtrooms, just steam rising, air moving, life continuing. I turned back to the binders on the table, the keys on the counter, the apartment I had fought to keep. They were mine. The court had said so, but freedom, I realized, was not about paper or rulings. It was about breathing without fear. It was about standing, even in an empty room, and knowing you were still whole. I touched the key in my pocket, feeling its ridges press into my palm. Once it had opened doors for my children. Now it opened only for me. And maybe, for now, that was enough. The first morning in my new apartment, I woke to the sound of waves. Not the echo of a gavel, not the clatter of arguments or the slam of a door, but the patient rhythm of the sea. I padded barefoot across the wooden floor, opened the balcony door, and let the salt air fill my lungs. On the small table outside sat a mug of coffee, steam curling into the cool dawn. I lifted it with both hands, the warmth seeping into my palms. The weight surprised me. It felt light, impossibly light, as if I were holding not just coffee but a promise. For years, I had carried objects that felt like anchors, envelopes of bills, transfer slips, forged papers heavy with lies. I had once held my phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, waiting for Emily's next demand, for Michael's next silence. Now, here in this modest apartment by the ocean, I lifted a cup of coffee that felt lighter than air. I sold the old house not long after the trial. The one I had bought, brick by brick, check by check, sacrifice by sacrifice. Walking through its empty rooms was like wandering a museum of a life I no longer lived. The walls echoed, not with laughter, but with absence. I left it without ceremony. The house had been built for family, but family had already abandoned it. It was not my failure to leave. It was my freedom. The money from the sale wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy this seaside apartment and leave a cushion for the days ahead. Enough to choose, at last, how to live. Not just how to survive. Here, I found a small circle. Robert visited often, bringing fresh bread from the market. Lydia joined an art class nearby and dragged me along. Together, we learned to hold brushes instead of bills, to mix colors instead of excuses. The group was full of gray hair and wrinkled hands, but laughter filled the studio like birdsong. My first painting was clumsy, a blur of blue and white. Yet when I stepped back, it looked strangely like freedom. The sky I once thought dark had finally broken open. Sometimes, I catch myself remembering the way my chest used to tighten when the phone rang, the way my shoulders curled under the weight of constant giving. I remember the sound of papers sliding across a table, the hiss of Emily's voice. "Sign it, Mother." Now, my mornings are filled with softer sounds. Gulls calling, spoons tapping against mugs, brushes scratching across canvas. Where once I bent under pressure, Now I stand taller, spine straight, lungs open. The contrast is so sharp, it feels like two lives, lived by two different women. But no, it was always me. I just had to step out of their shadow to see myself clearly. Around my neck hangs the old brass key, the one that once opened a house where I was no longer welcome. The one they tried to take, to twist, to use against me. I threaded it onto a simple chain. It no longer opens any door. Instead, it rests over my heart, a reminder, not of loss, but of reclamation. People sometimes ask why I wear it. I smile and say, it's my key to freedom. They laugh, thinking it's a metaphor, but I know the truth. I do not preach. Life has already taught me more than words could carry. But I write small notes in my journal now, lines I want to remember. Silence is not safety. Else e.g. swelve. Without respect is not love at all. T.S. Giving everything away does not make you whole. It makes you disappear. I read them back sometimes, not bitterly, but as reminders. They are not for Emily, not for Michael. They are for me. On good days, I walk along the beach, the sand cool under my feet, waves licking at my ankles. Children play nearby, their laughter mingling with the cries of gulls. I watch them without ache now. They are not mine, but they remind me that joy still exists, scattered like seashells waiting to be found. On the balcony at dusk, I lift my cup again. Steam rises into the evening air, blending with the ocean mist. The horizon stretches wide, unbroken, endless. I no longer wait for a knock on the door, for a demand, for a voice calling me selfish. The only voice I hear now is my own, and it is enough. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for walking beside me through the noise of the courtroom, the silence of lonely nights, and into this morning light by the sea. My name is H. Margaret Wilson, a woman who was once cast out of her own house, but who found the courage to open another door. I know my story was heavy. At times, it may have made you angry, or sorrowful, or reminded you of a wound you carry yourself. But if you are still here, it means something inside you resonated. And for that, I am grateful. Now I want to turn to you. If one day, someone you love, a child, a partner, a sibling, looked you in the eye and declared that you no longer had a place in the very home you built, what would you do? Would you stay silent, hoping love would return if you endured long enough? Or would you stand, trembling but firm, to defend your dignity? This is not a rhetorical question. It is the question I faced. It is the question many face quietly in kitchens, in hospital rooms, at family tables. I ask because I want you to answer it for yourself. If my story touched you, please leave a comment. Tell me what you would do. Tell me if you have lived something similar. Words written in this space are not just pixels on a screen. They are lanterns. Someone out there, reading in the dark, may see your words and realize they are not alone. If you share this story, it might travel farther than you think. It might land in the lap of a woman still hiding her bruises of silence, or a man who has been told he is worthless in his own home. Maybe your simple act of sharing will be the spark they need to say, enough. And if you follow along, week after week, you'll find more stories like this, true journeys of loss, but also of rising again. Each one is a reminder that dignity is not a luxury. It is a right. I am not here to preach, only to confess what I discovered. That silence can suffocate. That giving everything does not guarantee love. That the first person you must protect is yourself. I used to think freedom was something others granted me, through kindness, through gratitude, through recognition. But I was wrong. Freedom had always been mine to claim. It simply waited for me to stop apologizing and start unlocking the door. I no longer carry that old brass key in my pocket. I wear it around my neck, on a simple chain. It does not open any door now. Instead, it rests against my heart, a reminder of what I nearly lost and what I finally reclaimed. Every morning, when I lift my cup of coffee on the balcony, I feel the key touch my skin. It no longer feels heavy. It feels like a promise kept. So let me leave you with this. I am no longer a ghost wandering someone else's house. I am the keeper of the key to my own freedom.